Come behind the scenes with us today as we discuss plans and preparations for an upcoming detailed video series. As we've been learning and educating ourselves, we prepared today 5 points of Bible trivia for you, our podcast audience, that you might be able to answer, but you may be surprised. Hello and welcome to the BC Messenger podcast. My name is Steve Hall, and I'm here with my wife Jennifer, as we are each month. This is Real Science, Real Bible, Real History, and Real World. It is July 2026, Season 4, Episode 12.
I don't know if our podcast audience has ever noticed before, but the intro music and the outro music for this podcast sounds a little bit like the ticking of a clock. I believe when the podcast was getting started and you were choosing out the music for the podcast, that was what was on your mind. You said we focus a lot on the timeline and on the timing of different events. Let's have our music sound like a clock.
Yeah, it sounds a little newsy, maybe, like information, and like a clock ticking. That's right. I had forgotten about that, but that is true.
Here it is, episode 48, and we've never shared that piece of information with our audience before. So see, you never know. You keep listening, and you might learn something behind the scenes, something new. So
that's right.
But that kind of leads into talking about the passing of time. And here we are today, 11 days away from celebrating our country's 250th birthday. Now, by the time the podcast is released, it'll be just about the time for celebrating the 4th of July. 250 years is some passage of time since our country became independent, became its own nation.
And I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot about that from a lot of different sources, as it is the 250th year. We are aware of this because both of us were born in 1976. Talk about time. We are, what do you call us? Bicentennial
babies.
Yep. So
I'd like to find out what was done for the 200th birthday of the U.S.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
You were a few months old on the 200th birthday. I was an unborn child at the time. But here we are at the 250th. So yes, another passage of time, like you said, is because this is our 50th birthday year for both of us. And another marker for the passage of time is that this podcast episode is concluding 4 years of podcasting at the BC Messenger. This is the 48th episode, and we do one episode a month. So next month's podcast will launch us out into season 5. And that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's great. And time does go by so fast. It's hard to believe that. But we have covered a lot of territory in our podcast. It is all just a reminder that life is measured by time, isn't it? 250-year birthday of the United States. You know, our timeline bookmark, Jen, that we talked about last month, really, you want to see how young our country actually is, boy, you can look at that timeline bookmark and you can see we're not that old of a country. 250 sounds like a lot to us, but in the whole scheme of things, it really is not that long.
It's a very short amount of time, really. Right. That little bookmark is just a small little resource with a huge story to tell, just in that little compact format. We've been using it as a family, and no matter what we talk about in our family time, looking into the Bible, or even discussing something in history, or even discussing the 4th of July, you name it, we usually can refer right back to that timeline bookmark. In fact, our kids have kind of gotten to the point of like rolling their eyes like, oh no, not the bookmark again. Here we go again. But every topic seems to go back to it. And we've been able to illustrate so many things with that little resource. And if our listeners have not gotten a hold of it yet, some of you have ordered some different quantities of this bookmark, but you can easily go on our website, go to the shop tab, and you can easily order a quantity of those bookmarks to use for yourself. I was at a conference recently representing the podcast and was able to hand out bookmarks to people passing by saying, here's a a little resource we want to give you for free. It's a biblical timeline on a bookmark. Oh, cool. That's what almost everybody would say. And they would stop and look at it. And then there were certain things that their eyes would notice on that timeline that would start a conversation. So it's a great little resource. And we would love for our listeners to take advantage of it.
Well, we are in time. We are in time. We can't get outside of it. We don't even know what that would mean, right? Or look like. We think about that. Writers like to talk about that in stories, and movie makers. There's a lot of movies out there that talk about time changing, going back in time, forward in time.
Time being different and a different dimension. What's this movie that kids talk about sometimes? Interstellar.
Yeah, right.
And a guy goes somewhere out in
space, and he comes back to Earth, and so much time his daughter's grown up.
His daughter's become like an old lady. Well, time has hardly passed for him. Then you have stories like the Chronicles of Narnia. That's the opposite. A lot of time goes past in Narnia, but on Earth it's a very short amount of time. So yes, we like to do thought experiments and imagine what would that be like if we could escape out of time or change it. But only God can do that, or is above it, outside of time in his eternality and in his infinite nature. I read this quote in a book recently. Time and place are our own limitations as humans, and we can't impose those upon God, but that is the framework that we find ourselves in. It's within this time frame, within this timeline that God has placed us on.
We are the BC Messenger podcast. That BC stands for Biblical Chronologist. And chronology, this is all about time. It's all about biblical time, when things happened in the real world that we find in the Bible, the stories, the accounts, when they happened. And the new chronology that's here has just opened up all kinds of things. That's what we talk about on our podcast. And as we go behind the scenes today on this episode, we will once again see how all of the work here is built upon proper chronology, having the proper time frame in these biblical accounts, and it makes all the difference.
Let me just give the rundown of content for today before we get into that behind-the-scenes glimpse here with your podcast hosts. Now, usually it's Helen who gives us more of the behind-the-scenes glimpse here on the podcast. We save her segment for the end each time. Today, we do not have a Helen's View to be able to present. She's been busy. Her time has been taken up with other things lately. And so here is what we do have for today. We are going to be traveling deep into the wilderness with some trivia pertaining to the route of the Exodus and a new video series that we are getting ready to put out. So that's the behind the scenes thing with your hosts here today. And then after that, we do have a research update for you. It's been a while. When Dr. Aardsma gets into his lab research topics, sometimes it takes months and months before we get any kind of an update. But we have a new update for you that was published June the 9th, and it pertains to the aging research. So we will get into that later in the podcast. And then we have an interesting, very applicable quote of note to close out the episode today. So that's where we're headed.
Well, we are getting prepared, Jen, to produce a series of videos. As a matter of fact, we're further along than just getting prepared. We've begun a series of videos on the route of the Exodus. We have been, in a sense, deep in the wilderness lately.
Yes, we really have. You have a dream and an idea for something, and you talk through it for a little while, and then the time comes to begin to implement that. And so you begin working on the project. So we have discussed for a while that we have a lot of content from Dr. Aardsma that pertains to the Israelites in the wilderness. And even in the past couple of years, he has produced a lot of research articles on various locations and all kinds of things to do with the route of the Exodus. And so in communications here, we thought, we really need to take all of that and package it so that the layperson out here or the theologian or the Bible student or whoever can take advantage of it. So we decided the time had come, and we decided it would be in the form, first of all, of a YouTube video series. So that was our vision. At the moment now, here's where things stand. Here's your behind the scenes glimpse. I have a 3-inch binder with 27 tabs in it, filled with all the printouts of all the research articles that pertain to this topic.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming.
Now, that was a deep dive just to get all that content pulled together into that notebook and labeled so that we could then begin to dive into those articles and then figure out how to piece this together in a chronological presentation of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, and then eventually 40 years later entering into the Promised Land, and all those stops and so much detail in between.
Now, I'm sure, Jen, we could go online and Google that and find that anywhere, right? I mean, we could probably find podcasts.
That's what we need to do. Let's
place.
Just ask AI, give us the detailed information about the route of the Exodus, and we'll just use that.
Sure. And there's in order, all the towns, all the places,
with
all the cities,
evidence.
with all the evidence.
We could probably just pull up a podcast.
I mean, why are we even doing this?
Or look in Wikipedia. There you go. That'll tell you.
Yeah. Well,
okay. Hopefully.
Actually, no.
Hopefully our listeners can sense the sarcasm in our voices, because we are actually filling a huge void with this extensive series that we're getting ready to put out.
Right. What we have here is, and we use this word a lot, we hear it a lot, but it's true here. It's unprecedented. We are going to be presenting, is it actually 23? Is that what we decided on? Yeah.
I believe, yes. At the moment, we're looking at least 23 locations and stops.
23 locations and stops that the Israelites landed at on their way from Egypt to Canaan. The actual places, the actual route with real-world evidence. Now, again, many listening may not understand. They may be of the mindset of we were just being sarcastic a minute ago, and you may think, well, yeah, we've got evidence for these things. We heard the stories in Sunday school. We know. No, we don't. And this is partly what we cover on these videos, is the fact that we don't have this information. We've never had it.
You're talking about just generally known, in, taught in seminaries, just kind of accepted, conventional. Everybody knows it's this. No, there has never been that, and there's good reason for that, and that goes back to the chronology you talked about at the beginning. But we do now.
Well, we do now.
And you know what? When you're in communications for a research scientist and he puts out this bulk of information on a topic, we feel pretty responsible that we got to get this information into people's hands, into their heads.
Let me stress. We don't even know where Mount Sinai is. Am I not right? Nobody knows.
Well, what do you mean when you say we?
I mean in Christianity today. We do now. But my point is,
and then you have we.
My point is, you're not going to be able to go online and Google where is the true Mount Sinai. I mean, you can do that, and you'll come up. It'll come up with all these different locations that are possible candidates for Mount Sinai. But we don't. Okay, not we. Modern Christianity does not know where it actually took place at. And now that ought not be the case, because we're talking about millions of people, millions and millions and millions of animals. We're talking about people with pottery, at the base of a mountain that was there for a lengthy amount of time. Mount Sinai.
Now, we've covered Mount Sinai on the podcast at least once, if not more, in these past 4 years. So some of our audience is going to be familiar. But yes, you can go to certain groups and they'll give you a list of like 9 candidate mountains, and you check off the one that you think best fits with Mount Sinai. But what we're saying here is that no, we have enough evidence, we have enough details. And when you get the chronology straight and you know what type of pottery you're looking for, you know what time frame things need to date back to, and you know the requirements biblically for the topography, geography, all these things, distances, directions, then no, we don't have to choose from 9 candidates. We can
pinpoint it.
With all the tools available to us today, we can narrow down and say, this is clearly Mount Sinai.
With data, and plenty of data to show it, and then it just leads on from there. We just have this entire route now.
And you have Mount Sinai is only one of the 23.
Right. I just chose that out because everybody knows about Mount Sinai. We're going to be talking about some very obscure places that maybe you heard about in Sunday school or in church. Maybe you heard a name, and I bet a bunch of them you've never heard of. When we started this, I never heard of some of these places. You read through those biblical accounts and just pass on by it. But there they are on a map now as we see how, that's where they went. And it's also interesting because it's always surprising. The story is still exactly as the Bible says it, but our mind comprehended something completely different. We saw a Sunday school flannel graph or children's page. Let me bring up Mount Sinai again. Mount Sinai, this spectacularly massive, imposing-looking mountain with a black top. Looks like it got blown, Well, actually, that's not what it looks like at all when you find it in the real world. So this episode's, again, we're calling it a little bit behind the scenes, so we may kind of ramble a little bit. We're still figuring things out ourselves. We're talking things out.
Well, my older kids tell me that's what you're supposed to do on a podcast. You're supposed to just ramble.
Really? Well,
maybe this will be our truest podcast in the truest sense of the word, because we are not so much trying to present a ordered seminar type of information. We always present a lot of information because we are data rich, apologetic. We don't so much just have long rambling conversations, but this has been on our mind so much as we've been preparing that it seemed like that was the right approach for this particular episode, is to kind of let the host here talk out what's been on our minds with all this. Another thing. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, also to whet your appetite, just to get to be ready for these videos that come out. It won't be too many more weeks down the road, and we'll begin to release them. We already started our first one, again, behind the scenes.
The first one's been recorded.
Yep, we're doing it at my church, actually. We find a nice little spot there at the church that is recording really well, and just finished that one up, and now we're editing it, kind of setting the stage for it.
Here's behind the scenes. Everything around here is do it yourself, we are on a small budget, so we can't hire big time professionals as much as we might want to. So one of our sons was visiting, and he is a lighting expert when it comes to video, and he has worked on that for a number of years. And so while he was here visiting, we said, hey, would you please help us? We are setting up a little video recording studio to do this lengthy series, and we need some help getting the lights right. And so he very graciously helped us with that, got the camera just right, tried to explain to me how to run this fancy camera and get the lights just right. And so he's got it looking really good.
Well, when these come out, you watch it. When these come out, you watch it and let us know what you think. If he did a good job.
So by the time school starts, this series is going to be start to be posted on our The BC Messenger YouTube channel.
Proud of the Exodus. That's right.
All right, but I was going to say another behind the scenes glimpse. So I printed out these 27 research articles and got them in this binder. And then I'm like, okay, now what? All this information on some of this very obscure, some of it is more well known. What do I do now? I'm like trying to wrap my brain around how to begin to organize this. How many videos is this even going to be? I mean, 23 locations. Does that mean we need 23 videos? So the next thing I did was made this nice little spreadsheet. And I just started getting really excited when I made this spreadsheet, because I have the biblical route, like the name of the location, the name of the modern day location, the timing of the event after they came out of Egypt. There's your chronology, the biblical references that talk about it, the biblical chronologist article that Dr. Aardsma wrote. Which one is that goes with it? And then the biblical clues that are given about that location or the notable events that happened at that location. So my spreadsheet started getting filled in, and I just started getting more and more excited as I was looking at these different Bible passages, plugging in these different pieces of information. And I was really surprised several times, like, oh, I didn't know that thing actually happened right before they entered the Promised Land, was when this particular biblical account happened. I always knew the account, but putting it in the order, putting it in this storyline is so interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
I hope our audience finds it to be half as exciting as we have up to this point, because it's really cool to be able to present all this.
I think the word is unprecedented again. It's just amazing to see it. And you mentioned there biblical clues that are given. The Bible gives all these clues: topography, natural phenomena that's taking place, landmarks, distances. Again, millions of people and livestock traveling through this particular area of the world. Now we need to know when, and that's where the chronology comes in. And when we find that, now we can correctly pinpoint the route of the Exodus, retrace the steps, see the details, fit those pieces together, and give a detailed route and show the world. This isn't from somebody's imagination somewhere. Show Israel. Your history's true. It's real. These people really did come out of Egypt. Moses, all of that is a reality, and we're excited to show it on this video series. At least 23 locations, 23 stops. There's more, but these are the ones that we are going to hit, Lord willing, on this video series.
And there are more. Like, this field is wide open. Dr. Aardsma has set a very, very good foundation, and he's built upon it a good bit. But everything's not filled in. All the gaps are not figured out. All the information. There is opportunity to travel over to these areas and document things in these different locations. There's opportunity to study up whatever's available in archaeology at some of these different places. So you never know what could flow out of this type of information being made available.
And what an
people.
Exciting work to be involved in. If God called somebody into this, man, talk about being on the cutting edge of some serious discovery, especially if you're a Christian, wanting to demonstrate the reality of the biblical record. Yeah, so maybe someone listening just get stirred up about this a little bit. Well, let's move into our trivia questions and talk about some specific things. Again, just to we're going through this over here and test your knowledge a little bit on some Bible history.
Yes, we just pulled out 5 different points that were interesting to us as we've been going through all of this. And we thought, hey, this may or may not be familiar to our podcast audience, but who doesn't love a good trivia question to see if they can figure out the answer, if they know the answer, if they have any idea, or if they can learn something new. So before we give the trivia questions, let's just quickly review, look at your timeline bookmark, if you have one, and see what is the date of the Exodus. The proper date of the Exodus is, in fact, 2450 BC. That's when they came out of Egypt. And as we all know, they were in the wilderness about 40 years, or exactly 40 years. And so they went into Canaan right around 2400 BC. So that's the time in history that we're referring to with all of this. Not
the traditional date of 1450, but 2450 BC. In time, as we were talking about when we began the episode, in the time that we live in, 2450 BC.
In time and in places. I was on Google Earth earlier studying for the podcast here and was zooming in on a certain place and looking at that. And wow, okay, is that really where Moses and Aaron climbed up that mountain? Like, okay, wow, that's
takes out a fairy tale world and puts it in the real one that we live in. That's right.
All right, first trivia question.
Yes. Okay, first trivia question that we have is, what is Ezion Geber? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Ezion Geber. Ezion Geber.
Ezion Geber, that's how I say it.
That's how I've been saying it too. What is this place?
What is
that? Do you know what that is?
Now, if you study the Old Testament in detail, you will come upon this name multiple times in Numbers, in 1 Kings, in 2 Chronicles, in Deuteronomy, at least those places. Ezion Geber sounds like a name from a fairy tale.
If I had been in a Bible trivia game before studying this out and someone would have asked me, what was Ezion Geber? I would have lost. No clue.
You would have failed on that question.
I don't know what that is. But you're right. We find it in the book of Numbers. We find it in the book of 1 Kings, this place. And it is a location that is listed in the Bible of a stop by Israel.
Right. That's how it pertains to our series.
That's right.
It is a stop during the route of the Exodus. Now, that's pretty much all it is. It's, it says things like this. They set out from Abrona and camped at Ezion Geber.
Right.
Well, okay. So that doesn't
That's
give
all it
you,
says.
and there's no topography, geography, events, nothing there to help pinpoint the location.
And then they journeyed from Ezion Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin. Okay, that's what you get.
Right.
But it is a stop. It is a location.
So why is this interesting?
Right.
It's interesting because, as you said, it's mentioned in 1 Kings, and here is where we get the really cool information about Ezion Geber, and it's referred to several times through Kings and Chronicles. We learn something about Ezion Geber.
In 1 Kings chapter 9, Ezion Geber is associated with a guy by the name of Solomon. Now, I bet you've heard that name before. King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Ezion Geber. This is 1 Kings 9:26. King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom.
So cool. So the king of Israel, in its height of its glory days, built a fleet of ships, which you could sort of see it as a maritime base for this United Kingdom of Israel. So what do we learn? Okay, it's got to be on a body of water. You will not be building a fleet of ships out in the middle of the wilderness. You're going to be somewhere that's suitable for sailing ships. And so that is that super interesting, unique piece of information about Ezion Geber.
Yep.
And so the modern day location, according to Dr. Aardsma's Route of the Exodus, it is located on the Gulf of Aqaba on the eastern side, I believe. And if you went to a little city or town, or I'm not sure how big it is, it's called Haqul, Haql.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's called today. It is located on a little naturally formed port right there on that side of the Gulf of Aqaba. And that is where we believe Ezion Geber was located.
It's Solomon's port. 2 Chronicles 8:17 talks about this shore.
Solomon himself actually went there, according to 2 Chronicles.
Right. So a strategic maritime base for the United Kingdom of Israel is what this is. And it is the same as this location, Ezion Geber, that we read about with the children of Israel's trek through the wilderness. So we can pinpoint that place.
So it's like detective work. You read this on the Route of the Exodus, then later on you have clues that help you as you're piecing all of this together. Where was this place that later where they built ships, where they camped?
Right. So we're talking about a body of water. Specifically, the passage of Scripture mentions the Red Sea. King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Eloth on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. So let's deal with that for a minute. This term, Red Sea, comes up very often throughout the accounts of the route of the Exodus. So the question is, are we constantly returning to the same place all the time? I mean, is Israel continuing to come back to, quote, the Red Sea, or is that not the case at all? I think a lot of people don't even think about this, and often it really does give the idea of just wandering aimlessly anywhere and everywhere, round and round and round.
The most famous Red Sea is, of course, the Red Sea crossing, where God parted the waters in the biblical account there, and they crossed over, and then Pharaoh's army drowned. And so it would be natural and in a casual reading to hear Red Sea coming up again and again, and you think, oh, there they went, but they're back at there again, and they're back at the Red Sea again. And that definitely is a circular wandering picture that comes into your mind if you keep returning to the same body of water. But that is not what this biblical text appears to be communicating at all.
Right. So what do we have in the biblical translations and in the text? Well, very often, and you may know this, the phrase Red Sea can also be translated Reed Sea or Sea of Reeds. And in Dr. Aardsma's research, we see that the children of Israel, on their route that they are going, very often come to a marshy location where they would have put down in the records, we came to a Sea of Reeds. We came to a Reed Sea. And it was translated later on in our Bibles as Red Sea each time, which is very confusing.
For sure. And the ancient translators, even back in like the 1600s, are translating these narratives, and they don't have any idea of the geographical locations of most of this. And so for whatever reasons, it began to be called Red Sea over and over and over. But this idea is not original with Dr. Aardsma. There's many biblical scholars that will talk about that actual translation needing to be Sea of Reeds or Reed Sea. Right. And as we go through the route of the Exodus, we will be seeing on this video series numerous times where they camped next to locations that would have been a marshy, reedy sea body of water. But it wasn't the same one every time. And this one mentioned with Ezion Geber is its own location. It is not the same Red Sea that they crossed when God did that miraculous event for them.
Right. All right, well, that's Ezion Geber. If you didn't know much about it, now you do. So let's go to question number 2 of our trivia. Now, you might know this one. In what 2 locations did water come from a rock? Did a water from the rock miracle happen? What 2 locations in the Bible?
2 locations. That might even be news to some of us.
That's true.
Yeah, we all pretty much know that one time, Moses was supposed to do something, and then water came out of a rock and helped the poor thirsty people.
Well, and if you go online and you look it up, you can see this picture of this really imposing looking rock. It looks like it's been split down the middle.
Ignore.
No, we don't want to offend anybody.
That's, just fragmented and figments of people's imaginations, right. And it is not based upon any kind of data, evidence-based discovery or investigation. So
right. Well, the story of the water from the rock is very famous, very familiar. But you're right that it happened twice. Did you know that? 2 different times in 2 different locations. Now, again, many may know that and what's associated with that, and Moses, of course, being associated with it. But the first location that we have already talked about in other podcasts and before is the place called Rephidim. This is talked about in the book of Exodus chapter 17. And of course, it's the place where God tells Moses to take his staff and strike that rock. And the story, we talked about it on our podcast, there is in this area where we now know Rephidim is, the modern-day Ber Resisim, there is unique water-bearing shale in this area, artesian aquifers, and underneath that shale rock, there is water. And very amazing how God miraculously led his people to this very spot. The water was under their feet. They didn't even know it. And when Moses took that stick and busted that rock open, water began to come out. That is the place called Rephidim.
Right. So that's the first part of the answer of the
Right.
trivia question is Rephidim was first. And, when we study the account, we find out that was 3 months after they left Egypt that they're standing in this place called Rephidim and they don't have water. That's one of my favorite biblical accounts. It's one of my favorite episodes that we've done.
Right.
2-3 years ago now, the location of the biblical Rephidim, and there's so much there. But,
Well, you may remember another story in the Bible
okay,
where God told Moses not to strike a rock. Again, the children of Israel were thirsty and began to murmur and complain, as they did often. And then God told Moses to go to a rock and, do you remember? Not strike it, but speak to the rock. That's the second time.
good job to our podcast audience, because I just know that many of them were saying, yeah, he was supposed to speak to it. Okay, good job.
You felt that.
I felt that.
Right. Well, anyhow, that's what happened, but Moses did not do what God said, and because of his anger, which humanly speaking, I can totally have understood, he took that staff, he and Aaron, and instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock, and water came forth again. Now, of course, Moses suffered the consequences of that.
Okay, so where was that? That was the trivia question. So when he was supposed to speak to it, was this still at Rephidim? Was this,
right?
Where?
Well, it wouldn't have been a Rephidim because there was already water running.
Exactly.
If the rock was broken and water was coming forth, unless the water was truly miraculous and stopped after a while, but that's not what we're seeing. We have real data. By the way, you can go to Rephidim today, Bear Rephidim, and there's still
There is a well.
Water there.
I
Right.
am just dying. Okay, this is behind the scenes, so I'm just going
We're
to
just
share from my heart. I am dying to get over there to Israel and some of these other related countries, surrounding countries, and go to some of these locations. Because it only makes sense that if Moses struck a rock, water-bearing shale, and there was water underneath that layer of rock, and water came forth, that water source would have been maintained and developed even into modern times. I mean, water in the desert is fairly rare. That's why it's a desert. And so if you discover it and you're able to access it, that's going to become a very valuable asset to you. So yes, you can go to that well today.
Right. Well, the second location probably wasn't that because there's already water. There's somewhere where there's no water, and we do know where that location is. The Bible tells us it was in a place called Kadesh Barnea. Now, that's a very, very important place when it comes to the Exodus.
Yes, as far as the name of the second water from the rock miracle, it's Kadesh Barnea.
Right.
Right. So a couple of very cool points on this second water from the rock miracle. First of all, guess the timing of it. So the first one was 3 months in. This is 2.5 years later that this second water from the rock miracle happens. And they are in Kadesh Barnea, which is pinpointed in our newly proposed route of the Exodus. It is modern day Tabuk. And guess what we find in modern day Tabuk?
Well, hold on. What is Tabuk? What are you talking about?
It's a city
It's a city in Israel?
in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. There's just so much here. We don't have time to get into all
You might
of
be a
these
little
things.
shocked. Like
Right.
you've probably never seen a map with the route of the Exodus on it that goes
That's
anywhere
right.
near Saudi Arabia.
Well, you watch our series of videos and you will.
That's right.
The route that we are going to show is completely different from any route you have ever seen. And again, it's just the way of life. When truth comes forward, it's always so different than we would have expected. Anyhow, yes, Kadesh Barnea is modern-day Tabuk, a very well-known, important, thriving city in Saudi Arabia. And something interesting about Tabuk that corresponds with our trivia question, water from the rock. Do you know that there is a large underground aquifer right there at that spot, at that location, just like in Rephidim?
Yes, and many other clues point to that location. But yes, once again, shortly after they arrived there at Kadesh Barnea, there's no water. They're in the wilderness, and they have no idea there's a giant underground aquifer beneath their feet. Apparently, it was ready to blow wide open because God said all you got to do is speak to it.
We don't know fully what all that was all about, but Yeah.
But anyhow, guess what we find today? Irrigated fields, wells, all around Tabuk. I mean, it's an oasis in the desert, really, is what that is today, because they have such a natural, abundant supply of water. And so that apparently is where Israel, maybe they were some of the first to begin to access the water that's available there underground.
Now, we're just hopping around here today. You may be saying, well, how do you know that's where this took place? Well, you're going to have to watch our series of videos for that.
Definitely watch, because there's no way. This is going to be at least a 15-segment video series, so we can't give it all to you today.
But this is just a point that we're making here, again, with this trivia to whet your appetite. All right, let's go to our question number 3 with our series of questions here. Here you go. Again, this might be a shocking question because you may have never thought about this before. Where did Israel spend most of the 40 years that they were in the wilderness? What location did the children of Israel spend the vast majority of the 40 years they were in the wilderness?
Now, here's a knee-jerk reaction to that question would be, well, not any one spot. I mean, you guys should know they wandered, right? They wandered for 40 years. They were just in one place one day and another place the next day. Well, actually, that did happen for parts of that 40 years. But when you really dig into the text, and I'm telling you, we have been deep into the wilderness because studying for this episode, we were both trying to find out where's the biblical time frame for this specific location. And you really do have to do some digging. You have to piece different things together and really delve into the text. Numbers talks about things, Deuteronomy talks about things, Exodus does, and little pieces here and there. And so it's a big job to put all this together. But, okay, so what was the location? They were not just wandering from place to place, day after day after day. There was a large period of time, the majority of the time, in fact, they were in one place.
Well, it only makes sense, too, because when you think about it, I mean, to think that 2 million people and all that livestock were literally walking, for 40 years. I mean, God could have had them do that if he wanted to, but that's not what we find, actually, when we get into the scriptures and we get into the chronology and the archaeology. We find that there was a certain location. And that location, again, let's see if you got it right. You ready? Kadesh Barnea. Yep, same location we just talked about, where they had water from the rock the second time.
Right. When they first arrived there, they had some different notable events. It appears that Miriam died very soon after they arrived at Kadesh Barnea. And then piecing together clues in the text, we find out that it is 38 years after they enter Kadesh until they actually enter the promised land.
And again, it's the city of Tabuk in Saudi Arabia that we're talking about.
And when they come out of Kadesh, so when they enter Kadesh, Miriam dies. When they come out of Kadesh, Aaron dies. And we know from the biblical text that that was in the 40th year after they left Egypt. And so that tells us, though, all these different clues, and I can't get into all of it, but yeah, they were in Kadesh Barnea for 38 years.
And I've thought about that. They were wandering, right? In other words, they weren't in the promised land. They did not have their home place. It was an 11-day journey from where they were to where they were going, and it took them 40 years because of their sin and their lack of faith in God. But yes, they were wilderness wanderers, even though for approximately 38 years they were in the same location. And it makes sense that this is where they were. They had water now, abundant. You can read that in the scripture. Much water was suddenly there for the people. Many think that this, and by the way, the fact that they were in Kadesh Barnea for a long time is nothing new with us.
Oh, yeah.
This is, most scholars, you can research this online, the Bible tells us this.
But many students of the Bible may not realize, as you read about these accounts, that was the case. And so when they first get there, that's eventually pretty quickly, the spies go up into Canaan. And because Moses says, all right, people, we're going to go take the land. And the people say, oh, we can't. And then they send the spies up. The spies come back and give their report. And the people are afraid and all this. So Moses says, okay, we're not. You're going to be wandering in this wilderness. And then there's like a rebellion of sorts. And the people say, oh, we will. We'll go up. We'll take it. We're going to go conquer. And they go out. They leave Kadesh, some of them at least, and they get defeated and they come back. All of this is pretty early on. And so then they're told, nope, you're not going. God is going to let everyone die in the wilderness of this older generation. Yeah. And these kids are going to grow up and they will go in and take the land. And so then you have generations. And the Bible just puts it this way. When it briefly mentions it, it says they stayed at Kadesh many days.
Yeah.
And that's an Old Testament thing. It also says 1. That about the Pharaoh. After the course of those many days, the king of Egypt died and Moses went back to Egypt. And you find out that in that ancient terminology, that doesn't mean just a few years. Like they're talking about decades.
Many days.
Yes.
Right.
So that's some trivia about Kadesh.
Yep.
But to find that location and to say that it's Tabuk, you have to meet a lot of biblical criteria because there's a lot of details given. It has to be 11 days journey from Sinai. That's plainly said. There is going to be a ton of pottery there. Now, sadly, in Saudi Arabia and in Tabuk, not much archaeology has been done. It's not like Israel. So that's something that potentially could be explored by someone one day. But if it was within Israel, if it was in the bounds of modern day Israel, everybody would know because if they lived there for 38 years and used all of their pottery day after day for water and
it should be
everything,
rich with data.
That would be such an enormous archaeological site that it would be hard to deny. But we don't have that within modern day Israel. And that's been such a focus of archaeology in the Middle East, of course, is that the nation of Israel wants to excavate everything. The other countries, not so much. So that kind of helps exclude it out of that particular area. It's going to have an underground aquifer if it was the same type of water from the rock miracle that we found at Rephidim. So all of these different things are helping us narrow down where this place could be. But it's so funny because the biblical text sometimes just glosses right over it. They left Ezion Geber and camped at Kadesh in the desert of Zin, period. Next verse. They left Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor. And it doesn't tell you that in between those two encampments is literally 38 years.
A lot of details, in Scripture, especially such ancient Scripture, is left out. And just the data, just the facts are given.
Trying to list, a list of everywhere that they lived.
Yeah, and the people being written to would have understood these things. But today, going back, sometimes it's hard to piece it together and to see that in the text. But yeah, this Kadesh Barnea is a very, very important place. It became the base, the home base for the wilderness wandering. And right after leaving Kadesh, we have the death of Aaron.
And that takes us to our next trivia question.
That's right. So we're going to get to that in a second. We have the death of Moses right after Kadesh Barnea as they're leaving, not right after, but very soon after.
It helps get all the time frame figured out for how long they were in Kadesh, how long they were en route from Kadesh up to the Promised Land.
But yes, they stayed at Kadesh for many days. All right. And that does take us to our next question number 4. And the question is this: do you know the answer? On which mountain did Aaron die? Now, of course, we know that Aaron was not allowed to go into the Promised Land. And the Bible tells us that he died on a mountain. There's so much in the Bible with mountains. Not only did Aaron die, but Moses did. We'll get to that in a second.
Not on the same mountain.
Not on the same mountain. But which mountain did Aaron die on? Do you know?
Well, and here's a couple clues. So they leave Kadesh after the 38 years. They're finally leaving after those many days. And at the first stop, They camp at the base of a mountain, and that is where God tells Aaron to go up the mountain with Eleazar, his son, and with Moses, and Aaron would die on the mountain. So it can't be very far from Tabuk, right? It was their first encampment after leaving. And it also tells us they journeyed away from Ezion Geber. So knowing where that is, over to the west of Tabuk,
direction.
They were going the opposite direction. Well, if you take the modern day road out of Tabuk, and it's so often we follow the modern day roads because they're in the most natural places, and there's no reason to believe it was any different those thousands of years ago when they were traveling. Follow the modern day road east out of Tabuk, and about 30 miles out, you indeed come to the base of a mountain, which the Bible calls Mount Hor.
Mount Hor, H-O-R. If you said that, you got the answer right.
That's right.
But no one has ever really been able to tell where Mount Hor is located, where Aaron died. But yes, we see, and you can look on a map, as Jennifer said, this mountain on Route 15.
I know.
Going east out of Tabuk.
We don't have a modern day name for this particular mountain. I don't know if it's just a fairly uninhabited area as you travel out.
You can see it on a map.
But we do know the name of the road, and that is Route 15.
Route 15.
Traveling east out of Tabuk. And there is indeed a nice plain there at the base of the mountain where all of Israel would have camped.
Didn't you tell me something about a mystery word that we were looking at, studying?
There is a word in this passage that we do not find anywhere else in the Bible. And here is where extra biblical data can help you understand the text better, because there is this word Atharim. And the translators just say Atharim, by the way of Atharim, or let me look at it in another translation here, the New American Standard.
So this is the description of the children of Israel coming into this area called Mount Hor.
Yes. Well, okay. So Aaron climbs up the mountain and he dies, and they stay there for 30 days and they mourn for Aaron. And then they continue on this Route 15 going through this mountainous region, which is biblically called Mount Hor, and which you can see if you go on Google Maps, you can see exactly where this was. But this is what it says. So Aaron has died. They've mourned for him. When the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, heard that Israel was coming by the way of Atharim, he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. Some of the translations use Atharim as like the name of a town or something.
Right.
But nobody really has ever known what that was. But if you look at the topography and geography and look on Google Earth, look on the maps in Dr. Aardsma's research article, we soon learn that there indeed is a mountain pass traveling from the direction they were coming. After they finished mourning for Aaron, they continue traveling and they end up going through a mountain pass. And Dr. Aardsma believes that this word Atharim originally had that meaning of mountain pass. And apparently the root of the word is sort of like a path kind of a thing.
So through the Atharim.
Yeah,
not
through the mountain
necessarily
pass.
a place, but a mountain pass,
right,
is the idea.
And it's no wonder that this king had his bad guys up there in that pass and was able to jump on those travelers. And he fought against Israel, took some of them captive. And there's no mention here that Israel fought back or that they, their army just got together and had a battle. You can't really do that if you're traveling in fairly small, narrow groups going down through that mountain pass. So that is so interesting, because if you don't know where Mount Hor is, and you don't understand the topography of that area, you're not going to understand what that's talking about.
Right. So there's some serious clues that open up answers to questions that people have had for a long time just by getting the chronology right, putting it at the right time in the right place. And then we see these things. Well, let's go to number 5.
Wait, we got to do the little bit of trivia that comes out of that previous question. How old was Aaron when he climbed Mount Hor and died? Let's see if our audience knows. I bet some will know.
How old was Aaron?
I'm sure they will.
Well, he was pretty old.
By our standards, he was definitely pretty old.
Yep. and he had lived a full life by our standards. He was 123 years old, 123, according to the scripture. That is how old Aaron was when he went up on Mount Hor and he died.
And that was sad for those people. They were, I'm sure, very happy to be leaving Kadesh finally, and they leave, and then immediately their high priest, who has served them and led them for so many years, dies, which was what God had said. You will not enter the promised land. But then they had to face that reality that we are losing, our precious leadership, even as we begin to head up to the promised land.
Well, they had seen a lot of death. They had seen a lot of death with God's promises. And yes, now they're seeing their leadership die. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the Bible gives the description that they all watched, the entire camp. I mean, millions of people watched as Moses and Aaron and Eleazar, Aaron's son, climbed that mountain. And again, the topography here, we were looking at a map earlier. You can see right there, 30 miles from Tabuk, this whole area where the children of Israel could have stood and watched up on that mountain, at least from the aerial view we were looking at.
Right.
And seen them climb that mountain where Aaron was going to die.
We were asking the question, where do you think they most likely walked up? If this is the plain where everybody camped, then, and Aaron was 123, there's indication that he was more elderly than Moses was when Moses died. But it seems to be saying that Moses went up there with these two men, the father and the son, and he took Aaron's robe and he put it onto Eleazar. And so in the sight of the congregation, that would have been symbolic that the mantle of high priestly leadership is being passed to the son now.
Right. Big deal for Israel. And that's part of it, part of the story. All right, question number 5. Question 4 was on which mountain did Aaron die? And question number 5, and you talk about a big deal for Israel, upon which mountain did Moses die? Moses died on a mountain before entering the promised land. Do you know the name of that mountain? That's our trivia question. I'll give you a second. If you said Mount Nebo, Nebo, you were correct.
Correct. Mount Nebo. It's a little bit obscure because Mount Nebo is part of a greater range of mountains called Pisgah. And that's probably familiar. I know there's at least one old hymn that says something about from Mount Pisgah's lofty heights, I view my home and take my flight. Okay, so that's probably a reference to Moses dying up in the Mount Pisgah, which the top peak would have been.
So do we give them
Mount
points if they said
Nebo.
Mount Pisgah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you points for that.
We'll give you points for that. Good job.
Now so they come out of Kadesh and Aaron dies on Mount Hor. Then they have a 9-month journey, I think it is, until, let's see, let me look that up.
I think maybe 11.
It was the 11th month.
Okay.
For Moses, when he died, it was 6 months. So, okay. So they have a 6-month journey in between the death of Aaron to the death of Moses. And during that 6 months, a lot goes on. They travel up through some enemy territory. They conquer the kingdom of Sihon and Og. And they are getting ready to enter the promised land, because I'm sure a lot of our audience knows Moses did not go in, but he did see it. God let him stand on Mount Nebo and view the promised land. Therefore, if we're trying to pinpoint Mount Nebo on a map, it's going to have to be within visual distance of the area of Canaan.
The specifics are here in the Bible. Mountains of Abarim, next to the encampment in the land of Moab, opposite of Jericho, we're told in the scripture.
Right, it's very specific, and Jericho is a known location.
High enough to see many miles in all directions, a clear view of the plains of the Jordan near at hand. And this is what the Bible calls Mount Nebo.
It even says Moses was able to see all the way to the Western Sea. What is the Western Sea? That's the Mediterranean Sea. And so there you can imagine Moses climbed up there. Now, what did he do right before he climbed up? I just learned this. Deep into the wilderness, I have been learning a lot of things. I learned that the entire book of Deuteronomy is pretty much Moses recounting everything that God had done for those people over those 40 years. And it starts out saying, this was the 40th year, the 11th month. Moses spoke these things. That's Deuteronomy chapter 1. And then Moses speaks for 30-some chapters. We get to the end of Deuteronomy, and then God takes Moses up the mountain.
He's also giving them instructions again going into the promised land and the things that they are supposed to do, reminding them of what God wants them to do when they get in there. And he's going to bring Joshua onto the scene. And this would have been a big deal. Moses, in the eyes of those people, he was their rock. He was their leader. And when you get into the book of Joshua, you can see this, that God had to really encourage Joshua and the people to be strong, be courageous. You're going to go in and do it. Moses is dead. Now you rise up and go. That's not our point here. But here is where Moses died, and you can go on a map and you can see the location of this Mount Nebo. We now know, at least good as we can tell, with the information we have, with the evidence that we have, and the data, where this Mount Nebo is, the perfect location for all that meets all these requirements.
There are many things leading up to this, different rivers and plains and mountains, and all of these pieces are put into place that lead up to Mount Nebo there. And once again, wouldn't it be amazing to travel over there? This is in modern day Jordan, I believe. Wouldn't it be amazing to travel over there and climb up that mountain and see the view that Moses saw as he was getting ready to go into the presence of the Lord that he had served for how many years? How old was Moses when he died?
Yeah, another trivia question. Do you know how old Moses was when he died? Well, he wasn't quite as old as Aaron.
Not quite.
But almost. Moses was 120.
Yes.
When he died.
And so we learned from that Moses and Aaron, they died only 6 months apart. So they were about 2 or 3 years apart in age. That's interesting.
It is interesting because remember, Miriam was the one who was out there in the water when the mother put the baby Moses in the basket. So Aaron would have only been a toddler, 3 years old or so at that point.
2 or 3. And so Miriam died first. They died in order of age. Miriam, then Aaron, then Moses.
Well, we are just blabbing today, aren't we? We're all over the place.
It's just so interesting. There's so much here.
It is interesting. When you put this whole story together, it is, yeah. Well, something I thought of too, and again, we've got to remind our audience of that nobody knows where Mount Nebo is today until now. You could not have someone say, well, it's got to be here, it's got to be there. Well, there may be points on a map with a question mark beside of it. But today we can show you with the proper chronology right where it was.
I haven't studied this, but I imagine that other proposed locations are not too far from Dr. Aardsma's proposed location because we know he could see the Promised Land. We know it was opposite Jericho and some other things, but it is a mountainous region. So yes. Well,
there's our five trivia questions. Again, just jumping around all over the place. We're excited about this video series as we put all this together in a step-by-step route.
Lord willing, it's going to be a video series first and then a book format that our audience can take advantage of and use for Bible study and teaching purposes.
All right, well, carrying on, we are now going to talk about a research update as we are looking at the subject of the anti-aging vitamins and the aging research that is here. Vitamin MePiA's role in the body.
For the last couple of years at least, Dr. Aardsma has been solely focused on the anti-aging research, the aging research, I should call it, and what's happening in the body specifically with the aging process. He had initially discovered the anti-aging vitamins several years ago now, and after that, he was waiting for different lab results and things to conclude. And so he had some intervals in there where he was able to deviate back over to like the route of the Exodus that we just spent all that time talking about. And so he had kind of a lapse of time in there where he was able to do a lot more investigation on other topics, a lot of them centered around the route of the Exodus, the children of Israel, the phenomena that's described and all of that. But mainly, he has been focused on the aging research for some decades now, and that still hasn't really changed because it is a huge puzzle to solve. There are many, many pieces. And so as our audience knows, we do have the anti-aging vitamins, but research has been ongoing to continue to track down exactly what's going on in the body, even after the vitamins are introduced.
And he has been putting out a number of articles, new ones, on this topic. Actually, we looked back, and it was 2023 and 2024 when he was really putting out this bulk of material on the route of the Exodus, that you were just talking about. And then in 2024, within that year, began getting back into producing articles on the aging research front. That carried over through 2025. And then this year, 2026, he has put out this particular article. This is the first one in this year. And this one on vitamin MePiA's role in the body. Dr. Aardsma puts out his research, whether it's continuing on the exact same direction it always has, or whether it takes a turn and goes in a different direction, which a number of things in the vitamin research has, but it's all still there in its original form for anybody to go back and look into themselves to see the progression of the way things have gone. And so the encouragement today is to go back. If you're interested in this and you would like the full information on the aging research, go back. They're all published on his website. Anybody can go in and read PDF files. But the newest one is from June the 9th, right? 2026?
Yes, just this few weeks ago, we had this article published on the role of vitamin MePiA, which is the second of the two anti-aging vitamins.
Right.
And if you enjoy chemistry, if you enjoy biology, these types of sciences, this will be very interesting to you. Everybody knows free radicals are bad. ROS, damage, right? Reactive oxygen species.
If you're at all familiar with aging research.
Yes, that's not a mystery. That's not unknown. And that's why antioxidants are so important. But this article is talking about a breakthrough, theoretically, on Dr. Aardsma's part as to exactly what role this second vitamin is performing as it handles the worst of the lot of the ROS in the body. There is one specific reactive oxygen species which does not biologically have a molecule to deal with it. And this is me trying to put this in layman's terms. I'm no scientist. I'm just trying to help you understand a little bit of what's in this article. Dr. Aardsma is proposing that it is MePiA that was originally designed by God to handle that specific worst, most damaging, most destructive of the ROS. And so the article goes into great detail explaining how and why this theoretical breakthrough has happened. And the practical outflow of it is that probably the recommended intake of MePiA is going to be increased because this theoretical breakthrough is showing that the body may actually need quite a bit more than what it has been getting in the supplement up to this point.
This is an ongoing and evolving research, as any good research is. And this is a behind-the-scenes episode that we are having today. So to let you know, we are right now proofing and looking through a brand new article by Dr. Aardsma that has not come out yet.
By the time this podcast goes out, it likely may be available.
Right,
so
that's true.
Right now it isn't, and we are reviewing it as a team here. So yes, hang on for the roller coaster ride. is basically all I can say if you're following the aging research in detail. It's a lot of ups and downs, but we are trusting God for very good outcome in the end, according to his promises and according to his redemptive work in the world. We are expecting God to bring great good out of all of this in the end.
And on the scientific front, as we carry on in our podcast, we have a quote of note today that goes right along with it. We did an episode not too long ago on science and the corruption that is in modern science today, going through that topic. And this quote of note today goes along with that. We saw an article in the Imprimis magazine. I think that's how you say that. Imprimis. From Hillsdale College.
So this is a publication Hillsdale College has put out for many, many years. It's free, and they always have great thought-provoking articles. So go online and find that. It'll be, the link, of course, is in the show notes.
Right.
But this was a fascinating one. I don't always have time to read the Imprimis articles that come. They're usually like a speech digest. So somebody notable came and gave a speech at Hillsdale, and then they put it down, in print form in this publication.
Right.
But when this one came and I saw the title, or we saw the title, actually I was out of town. You saw the title first and you set it aside and thought read it and said, we've got to look at this. What was the title? That was so intriguing. It was Launching a Second Scientific Revolution.
Right. And the author, I'll say his first name and you'll say his last. Okay. J.
Bhattacharya.
There you go. Yes.
Bhattacharya. I don't know.
J or Bhattacharya. We should have looked this up, but we didn't.
He is the director of the National Institutes of Health. Right. And that is a very interesting last name with lots of letters.
Yes.
But
we
a great appreciate the article.
Right. And going along with what we had talked about on our podcast and just the reality of what's going on in the world in science. And many, listening to the podcast, I would have no idea of these things if I wasn't involved in this work here. But let's just give you the quote. The quote is this: "We can solve the nation's health problems if we establish gold standard science." When I say gold standard science, I mean science that is replicable at the bleeding edge and supports scientists with new and promising ideas wherever they are. Achieving these goals will amount to launching a second scientific revolution. Now, that quote just pulled out may seem obvious to people, but the point that he's making in his article is we haven't had freedom for new and promising ideas wherever they are to be made available to universities and publications and all of this because we've had big science blocking the gates.
We went into a lot of this on our corruption in modern science and why we are independent. We did a whole episode on that. And so this article just rings so true with everything that we already covered on that episode. And I just love his hopeful outlook. He is talking about the National Institutes of Health and their history of having a great impact in American medicine and health and helping the general public, but how they have faltered in that in more recent years, and they have not been doing their job well. And he's trying to pinpoint what are the reasons for that, and then what do we need to do to change this so that we can begin to advance again. And he may or may not be thinking of the nation's health problems as including aging. I definitely am because I'm so close to the work here. Dr. Aardsma definitely is. And so I would include that, in the quote. We can even solve the health problem of aging, if as a community of scientists, we will reach out to those who are independent, those who are maybe an outsider, those who have the crazy ideas that maybe even prove to be false. This is what the article talks about. But then in the end, that idea that was proven false helped advance the true ideas. And so it all plays a role.
Right.
And so I hope you'll go to the show notes and read the full article. It's well worth your time.
And it's good to see people in prominent places recognizing the problems. And we're all praying for and hoping for resolution to these things. So that's encouraging. Well, been a good episode.
We hope you have a wonderful celebration if you live in the U.S. for the 250th birthday. I think Americans everywhere are going to celebrate wholeheartedly this birthday of our country. I was going down Main Street in the little Midwestern town, and the patriotic bunting is out, the flags are out, people are getting ready to celebrate, and God is very good to us. And we are excited that we have now wrapped up 4 entire years of this podcast.
Wow.
Of pursuing and presenting real science, real Bible, real history, real world.
Yep. And it's been a fun 4 years. I think we've grown a little bit in what we're doing, even though we did ramble today. Well, let's keep going. As the clock keeps ticking, time keeps going. Let's continue to ask the Lord, as the old hymn writer said, to take our moments and our days and let them flow in ceaseless praise. On to season 5.
Yes. And our style may have changed a little over the years, I guess, but I do believe that every single of the 48 episodes has presented information, a data-rich apologetic, which is our goal, new ideas, plenty to think about. We're looking forward to more of the same in the coming season 5.
We'll see you in August.